all made a huge effort to get up early this morning and to come and join us for a wonderful breakfast. It means so much to each and every girl that you are here, and to the many dads who can't be here, we are actually live streaming this event. So to all the dads who are far and wide, we're thinking of you, welcome, and we hope that you feel part of this special event even though you're not physically here with your daughters. We are first and foremost a boarding school, and we have 180 boarders currently. So as you will appreciate, a lot of our fathers are unable to be physically here. So we want to live stream as many events as we can from now on. What a privilege it is to be a parent and to guide our children through all the stages of their lives. And having a daughter is extra special because you get to see life through a different lens. And I agree with John Sinnell, who says, it's admirable for a man to take his son fishing, but there is a special place in heaven for the father who takes his daughter shopping. Remember that, girls. So I'm delighted that the members of our Student Council have created this opportunity, and shortly our Deputy Prefect Olivia Eames will introduce our amazing guest speaker, Rod Drury. But let us begin with a message from our girls.
I love my dad because he's just a brilliant handyman to have around.
Because he brought me into this world and he teaches me things. I love my dad because he supports me through all my good and bad times and he made me sweetness and heart.
I love my dad because he's so funny, kind, generous, and he's just the best guy ever.
Because he cooks really good meals and is always very nice to me, and I love him and he loves me.
I love my dad because he makes good dad jokes.
Because my dad is awesome, he's really nice, he's really generous, we do karate fights together, he's really helpful when I'm trying to practice for something, and he's all around awesome.
I love my dad because he cooks great meals for dinner and because he always supports me no matter what, like at my netball games, he's cheering, and yeah. Because he makes me a cup of tea. Sorry, that's like, I would say that. I love my father because he just is nothing, and it's just like, you know what I mean? I love my dad because he's my family. I love my dad because he's always honest to me and he wants out of his room.
Because they're so gnarly.
We love our dads because they have so name. Jeremy.
I love my dad because he's super kind. I love my dad because he's adventurous. I love my dad because he's super caring and generous.
I love my dad because he's so kind and he always takes me up to my feet.
I love you so much, Dad. He's supporting me through everything. Love ya.
Our dads are awesome!
Good morning, I'm Olivia Eames, Deputy Prefect of the Student Council. Once again, thank you all for coming to this very special event. I'm greatly honoured to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Rod Drury. We are so very fortunate to have you here today with us. Rod is an outstandingly successful businessman, nationally as well as internationally. He will be best known to many of you as the founder of Xero. While Rod is clearly a highly successful businessman, he is also a big-hearted dad to his three amazing children. So please join me in welcoming aboard Mr. Rod Drury.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. Nice to see some good friends. Running about 20 minutes this morning, and I thought the best way to give you what you want is to have you ask questions. So if anyone's got any questions to kick things off, it would be great. See my strategy, no threat, right?
What was your role?
Cool. So the question is, what was my role at the beginning of Xero? So Xero was my fourth business, and it's sort of interesting. Each sort of business you do gives you more confidence for the next one and the next one. And the business I did before Xero was a software company called Aftermail. And super interesting. We didn't set out to build a world-class business at that time. We wanted to prove that we could build a world-class product. When you're in the technology industry from a small set of rocks in the South Pacific, you kind of want to prove that you're as good as all the other companies that are happening around the world. So we really wanted to build something that was seen as one of the best software products in the world. And so with Aftermail, I had an idea that email was fundamentally broken, so we built an email archiving system, and we actually only been in that business for about 2 years, but it was getting quite good quite quickly, and we got up to about a couple $100,000 of revenue per month, and which was about 2 or 3 million per year, and which meant that we were starting to get some wins. We had about 40 or 50 quite big customers all around the world, and we went to a big Microsoft trade show in Florida that year, and we were right at the point where we either raised a whole lot of money and keep going, or somebody would buy us. And we ended up winning the best product in that show, which was pretty cool, so we took that goal. And then we also looked around and we realised that we had good technology, but we built a global distribution, and we were kind of in a sweet spot for somebody to buy us, so we ended up selling that business, and that happened within, I think we actually had truly the Matt came across the table within about 18 months of starting it up. We sold that for, what was it, something like 25 million US in cash and 15 million in earnout, which we got none of, which was interesting. But that really ticked the goal of showing that we built a bit of world-class tech. And I remember standing in the room in Disneyland actually with the CEO of Quest, and he stood up the front and he said, there you go, should meet Rod, he's down the back there, he's found the Aftermail, which he just bought, and we had a sort of 2 or 3 minutes of fame, and then he went on and told him a much bigger strategy around how Quest was competing with a bunch of other businesses, and what those businesses had done, who'd been taken out, and who they brought. And you kind of think we get up to level 10, and level 11 presented itself, where we thought it was pretty cool building a business and selling it, but actually Vinny, the CEO of Quest, was playing a big game, and we were just born in it. I'm like, man, there's a whole other game there, and that's being a public company where you have capital to go and really execute strategy, do acquisitions, and just go bigger. So at the end of doing Aftermail, it was like, right, I'm going to do the next thing, and I want to do it as a public company, and that became the start of Xero. So the Xero is a little bit different. Now I wasn't the kind of founding programmer. I put a bit of the money I got from Aftermail into starting Xero, and that one we knew we wouldn't sell quickly. We had the capital to actually build a long-term business. And we just had our annual meeting in Auckland yesterday, and we're now 11, 12 years later. Numbers are kind of nuts. We're annualised revenue of something like 680 million or something. 2,500 staff all around the world, 1.8 million customers, and it's really just the beginning.
How big do you think Xero can get to, Rod?
Really big, and you should put all your time at saying super today. Super. We haven't, we just welcomed David Bodie, who was the used to be CEO of Telstra on the board yesterday, and so we're getting really high quality people into our business now. So you see the business from basically setting like a level of now, how big can it be in the future? And he was saying how there really haven't been that many big global businesses from this part of the world, and he really sees that we are one of those. So once you get to a certain amount of scale, it kind of becomes inevitable that it just keeps getting bigger. So yes, it does really feel like it's still just really early days, kind of at the end of the beginning, and who knows how big it could be. So we benchmark ourselves against Atlassian, an Australian technology company. They've always been sort of 2 or 3 years ahead of us. They've just passed a billion US of revenue. We should get that in the next 2 or 3 years. But there's 6 times our market cap. So if we keep executing what we're doing, then there's still a huge amount to play for. Once again, fully broken percentage of development.
What were the challenges in choosing to list such a company that was young in its gestation?
Yeah, so one of the big questions about Xero was, how did we actually fund it out of here? We ended up going public in our first year, and the reason for that was what I learned in a nutshell. We had about, when we sold that, we had probably about 20 staff, and everyone was doing about 3 or 4 jobs. So it's a classic underfunded Kiwi business, but we managed to hustle and do quite well. But then when we were planning Xero, we kind of realised we needed about 50 staff, and if you had 10 programmers, you want 10 testers, and then you need some salespeople, and you need an HR department to look after all of that. So it added to about 50 people, and 50 people is probably about sort of $500,000 a month in salaries, and I think we invested maybe $50,000 when we first started Aftermath, so $500,000 a month was crazy talk. So we figured $500,000 a month is about 15 million of funding we need. At that time, New Zealand's biggest venture capital funded deal was probably 2 or 3 million. So we probably could have raised money on the West Coast, but it would have been a valuation of maybe 18 to 20. So we would have owned much of it if we had got it away. So we actually just followed. I think this is what's pretty common about New Zealand business. You follow other people quite quickly. So Jeff Ross had just done 42 Below as a public company, and sold that to Vitali, and it was a similar thing. Didn't really have a lot of value, but a big story and had the capital to go and be a big idea. And so yeah, we went public in our first year. So I think we were quite well known as having the smallest amount of revenue for any public company in the world. Our first year reported results on 112,000 of revenue, and as I said, now we're at run rates like 680 million.
Yeah, obviously everybody knows you now as Rod Drury from Xero. What about the Rod Drury? Because typically there's always quite a hard road at some stage of your life, because you've gone back a few years from your journey, I suppose.
For the girls, my background was went to Green Meadows Primary School over in Green Meadows, Tauranga Intermediate, and then Naked Boys. And we had an amazing teacher in our fifth form, Bob McCaw, who was really a pioneer of bringing schools. And Bob actually created a program with the parents. I think that was when Apple II computers first came out, and parents could buy a share in a computer at about $1,200, which was a huge amount of money back then. And so we could buy shares for about $50. So 24 parents could buy a new computer, and this is before the internet. So if you wanted to use them over the weekend, your parents would pick you up on a Friday, put a computer in the back of the Ford Escort, and drive home and learn some programs. It was so interesting because that really created a passion of computing for me. What I loved about computing was it was unconstrained. You could put your thoughts into a program that worked while you were sleeping. You basically build a machine. So I kind of thought you could almost earn infinite amount of money if you didn't have to actually do the actual work, and you could get the scale that you could program. And that, and especially coming from a small country, that was what was really exciting. So I just wanted to program. So then my career was about finding jobs that were doing what I loved doing, and that was programming. And so I never really thought about my main criteria for picking where I was going to work, where would it feel like I was having the most fun, because then it wouldn't feel like work. So I ended up, went down to Victoria University. I didn't have any brothers or sisters that had been to university before me. When I got the school certificate, I was the most educated Drury of all time. And I didn't have any brothers or sisters, so at university meant Massey in Palmerston North. And someone said, there's one down, there's Victoria University down in Wellington. I'm like, Wellington? Jesus, I'll go there. So I ended up going there. No one told me about Dunedin, thank goodness. And I did systems papers that were hidden in the accounting faculty because information systems was kind of new. And they were terminally assessed, so they didn't have exams. And I could go snowboarding earlier. So that was the main criteria for picking, doing a accounting degree. Worked out, thank goodness. In fact, the other day someone said, I saw the degree you had, and I went, oh, actually I've done accounting and information systems. That seems quite relevant now, so I think that. But it was really just because I didn't have exams, I picked it. And then I had a really good university lecturer in my last year who was like a global expert in sort of graphical information systems and these tools that allowed you to kind of model how businesses work on a computer screen. So it was all pretty colours and stuff, I was quite drawn to that. And then it turned out that after Young, the accounting firm that's now Ernst & Young at the time, had a bunch of consultants that were working in that, so I really wanted to do that. So went to after Young and said I'd like to do that stuff I saw at university, and they said well you have to do auditing for a year. So okay, that was fun, I enjoyed that. And then by the day my year was up, I went in and said okay, I've done my year. All right, what? Well, you said if I did a year I can go and do IT consulting. So I took my way into the IT consulting group, and then again that felt like it was a lot of fun because I was playing with computers. And then about that time, Microsoft had some really cool programming tools that came out. So we ended up actually sort of playing with that stuff on the weekend. And then again, to do it during the day, we were to sell a job. So myself and another guy at Ernst & Young, we basically went to one of our customers, the Kiwi to Arts Council, out of New Zealand now. We pitched building their grant tracking system, which was a $50,000 or $60,000 project. This was on a beta version of Microsoft Access. It wasn't even a real product at that point. And we went back to our partner at EY and said, oh look, we sold a $60,000 job. Can we go and do that project? And he was completely conflicted because, what? That sounds incredibly risky, but what, you guys went out and sold a job without me? And then we started a little software development group inside EY and then filled that out and went on from there. So, so my motive, me getting started, we were just doing something for fun. So work's never felt like work, it's just been a party. And in fact, it is a party because I was in our Auckland office yesterday, and there's a full-time barista there making coffee for people, just like a nightclub.
Hey Rod, just a quick out of yours for the world of work ahead. Have you got any sort of thoughts about what skills they should be working on making sure those maybe would become?
Yeah, so if I was giving some career advice, which I'm often asked for, is do two things. Do some computing, because everything is being computerised, and do whatever you're passionate about. So really understanding the systems thinking and how computing works, I think is so relevant. Like the world of computing is just huge. You'll always do well in that. So just getting some understanding of that makes a huge amount of sense. But do what you're passionate about, because the great thing is computing isn't just computing, it applies to everything. So if you can have the skills of understanding some systems thinking, but also have a real passion that you're right into, you'll be able to apply that and have some fun. Or ignore all of that and just have fun to work out later.
What are you currently up to? What's the future look like?
So I'm currently unemployed, I call it. So about a year ago, I resigned as full-time CEO. So with our business, with that many 2,500 staff, you've operating all around the world. It's a 24/7 business. It really is a roller coaster. You can't get off. So kind of towards the end of it, I realised that I was travelling every week, and year before last, that every week I was on a plane, often twice a week, and travelling overseas every 3 or 4 weeks. And that really does take a toll. It's hard work. And so my kind of life was I'd leave the village on Tuesday morning. It was a New Zealand week, back on a Thursday night, and then quite often every 3 or 4 weeks overseas somewhere. And super fun because you're building a business, but it's also pretty tough and the kids are starting to get older. So I realised that I was probably cramming 20 years of career into 12 years. And so we managed to really work on succession inside the business, and I got a guy called Steve Bamos who's a bit older than me, and he used to run Microsoft when I was just a baby. And he was helping me with building a cohesive international leadership team, which is kind of really the skills of our business. The innovation was kind of locked in, which was my thing. It actually came about how do you run a global business with really strong management in this country and make all of that work, which actually brought me to tears, to be honest. And other people can do that. So it became clear that actually Steve was a candidate and actually what the business needed for the next phase. And it was like, hang on, we'll stop. So I transitioned out, so I'm on the board. Still pretty busy, but not working full time, and the business has just flourished since Steve's taken over, which is great. So still on the board of Xero, which is pretty good. But I realised if I went into something else, then if I compressed 20 years into 12 and went back and did work in something else, there's no point doing that. So I've been doing a few other things. But my big purpose of what I'm working on, I was pretty involved in in pushing for a chief technology officer for New Zealand, because I think we're small enough that we should be doing some cool stuff that actually positions New Zealand so everybody wins in the future. And the way the world is at the moment, our traditional big brothers that we look to aren't really that good, and I think we've got our own kind of value proposition in the world. So I've been thinking about, and then New Zealand's too small, you don't really want to have a role with the government, that would be fun. So I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what could we do as a country to have a platform for a whole lot of people to do some cool stuff. And so what's our competitive advantage, what's our dues with Saudi Arabia? And it became pretty clear what it is, and that's renewable electricity, 90% plus renewables. So what I've been doing is going around talking with government and with the leadership teams of all the big energy companies and kind of unpacking why aren't we 100% renewable. And it's super interesting. So Fonterra is one of the biggest users of energy for industrial heating. They spend $45 a unit for gas and coal, and electricity is like $55 a unit. So it's just not logical that they'll ever, electricity is half the price, they're not going to move all those industrial heating processes through to electricity. So like our electricity is too expensive. And then they're pulling a rope on that, and then worked out we only store 3 months worth of water. It's like, oh, why don't we store 3 years worth of water? It was because obviously we're, because of the environment, we're scared to put dams as we've got a full space in over the last few years. So what's super interesting is the uses of renewable electricity are starting to become super clear. So New Zealand is, from a flight's point of view, because we're two small skinny islands, the longest flight can do is about an hour and a half. So if we had electric aviation, you'd just flip the whole 100% of the market, or 100% of the domestic fleet. It's very, very short haul. Whereas in Europe, we're doing quite a bit of electric aviation, as something happen in the next 5 or 10 years. But you have a little electric planes the next major ad is going to fly for 15 hours. Whereas in New Zealand, we've actually said we're going to completely flip the aviation fleet to be electric in 15 years. And I found this crowd at Rod Drury University who are experts in superconducting electric motors, and have just passed the threshold where they're getting 15 kilowatts of power per kilo of engine mass, which is the crossover point. So in about 3 to 4 years, they should get about 25, where you can fly a 737 for a few hours, that sort of size plane. So that's all starting to happen kind of interesting. So that's one example of, imagine as a country, we said we're going to completely flip the domestic aviation fleet, and so with that super cheap flying, become an R&D test lab for the world, and you have no carbon bills for flying. That'd be kind of cool. So that's one example. Obviously, electric cars are an example that's here and now, and Auckland public transport, if that electricity was super cheap, we'd have small autonomous electric buses running around. So you can start building a business case for using electricity much, much more. So if you can increase the demand for electricity, that can start justifying increasing the supply of electricity, and then you say, okay, we'd love to, then maybe we should And that sounds like a bit of a fantasy of how do we afford to pay for that? Well, the Aussie super funds, the Aussie super funds have $2 trillion under management, and we give that out to funds that invest in Amazon, Google, Microsoft, companies that don't pay tax in Australasia, and also, you would argue, are creating short-term, medium-term domestic employment issues. So the Aussie super funds are dying to find multi-billion-dollar projects to deploy some of that $2 trillion. So there's a huge amount of money sitting there, and then there's a big opportunity for us to massively reduce the price of electricity. So what I've been doing is working with the Greens and saying, look, if we want these electric outcomes, then we have to, can't just tweak the needle with a bit of solar and wind. Actually, why don't we store a huge amount of water? There's battery waters lake. And you can't opt out of that decision. You need to decide where's the least worst or the best place to put it. And I think with it having a role of not really having to work and then going to spend time and not really having a vested interest, I think it's a good thing to do. Making quite a bit of progress on that. So it's quite good fun. Exciting. Electric planes. Who would want that? Yeah, so a question, nice technical one, is any desire to take Xero private? And we actually think that, what's interesting about companies once they get to scale is you get to really lead. And one of the really big things that we've been doing at Xero is trying to be a leader. One of our values is challenge, and also champion, and as well as being human. We also have beautiful, and ownership is our key values. And what we think it's important that as businesses get to a certain scale, that you create, as well as creating your own business, making that will create lots of opportunities for other people. So we have thousands of other technology businesses that build on top of our platform, which makes us super strong. It's not just us, it's all these other little companies that are building things. And we also created pathways to bring more capital into our industry, and we can, means that people get funded if we create new jobs. So we actually like being a public company. It gives us a lot of strategy flexibility, so we can keep raising capital. So in total, we've raised almost $1 billion in capital over the last year, over the last 10 or 12 years. And we've also been able to have just million New Zealanders invest in us and do really well and about themselves, so we like that. But also we're able to push our values through, so there's a couple of things that we've been doing. As you see, a lot of governments around the world we normally look to don't seem to be displaying values. And a lot of companies around the world also don't show them. So Uber would be a really good example. Their business model is about getting the most desperate driver to get a job at the least amount of money. And so they don't encourage long-term employment. They want the newest driver to arrive, which then becomes a safety issue for clients. So we try to lead by example, and a lot of the work we're doing at the moment is doing a lot of stuff around mental health. So we've done work around, we call our Xero assistance program. There's been a lot of stressful things in New Zealand at the moment. So through our partners and customers, we've opened up some counselling services, which our partners and customers can apply for. We've had 5,000 people go through that. The small businesses generally don't have access to where to start that, so we've been able to do that. And we've done a lot of work around diversity and inclusion. So we have a goal of greater than 40% female representation in our business, right through to the board. I've done a lot of work on to make sure that we have all of that. And one of the really interesting things that we're seeing in the workplace at the moment is the issue of gender and transgender. So sort of quite an interesting article last week, and we're seeing this quite a bit in the US, where there's a real ideological battle going on. So the Conservatives have pushing really hard against women's rights at the moment, and there's a lot of racial stuff going on, and we're some of the liberalisation of things getting through over the last year in the US, just seeing this intense focus. So we're very attuned to that through our staff, and then we take it, with a diversity and inclusion officer inside the business. So we're very actively working on those things at the moment. Because we think if we can take a leadership role, it ripples out through the 30 or 40,000 accountants that we work with and out further into the business. So businesses can really do good as well as be very successful.
Probably when I come into New Zealand since 1993, I've heard a very consistent wish and desire for New Zealand to increase productivity and offer technology. I recollect back in 1993 when they always seemed straightforward. We're still talking about this week. Do you have any thoughts on how we actually do it?
Yes, so there's a few, because the question was how do we grow productivity in New Zealand? Well, some of the issues are there are no strategy. We can't wait for government to do that. So a lot of talking around the electric stuff, we're starting to get to a point where we've had enough success that there's people around that will drive that. So it'll be up to individuals leading and driving those things. But we do have some really good stuff, like we all laughed at the cycleways, but they're amazing. So that's driving a lot of economic activity. But one of the best things we've done over the last few years is ultra-fast broadband. So I've got gigabit fibre in the village here. It's unheard of. In Australia, I've got friends that are connecting to the Australian National Broadband Network, and it's DSL over copper, which is nuts. So we have some real competitive advantage. So what we did was we wanted to prove that that businesses of scale can operate in provinces. So a couple of years ago, we deliberately created an office over at Napier, and it was sort of marginal from an economic point of view, but again, from a leadership point of view, we wanted to show that we could actually have a significant presence here, and that's been amazing for us. So for a lot of our Xero staff that are kids that just starting school, it's very attractive for them to keep their careers going inside the business and move to provinces. So again, leading by example, using that fibre infrastructure, I think that's super cool. I'm really proud that we did that. The next thing is getting used to getting capital in your businesses. You do really big things and learning how to operate online and do all those good things. So I think we're making good progress, but there's a real lack of leadership, and I think that it's up to the private sector to lead and to demonstrate how to build productivity and stuff that's out there.
high sense of integrity and determination. But at the same time, she has a very wicked sense of humour and a freedom of spirit that you don't often see. She is determined beyond her years. And the way that she's adapted to life at Woodford, taken on the challenges and the successes that she's had, have proved immense in their standing in my eyes. And Rebecca Daly, you make me proud every day.
지원아, 안녕 아빠야. 지원이하고 고등학교 때 유학 가서 많이 힘들었을 텐데 열심히 노력해서 적응해 나가는 모습 보면 너무나 자랑스러워. 항상 긍정적이고 착한 마음으로 생활하는 우리 지원이 앞으로도 모든 것이 잘 될 거라 믿어. 파이팅! 혜원아 안녕 아빠야. 혜원이는 유학생활 일찍 시작해서 혼자 이겨내느라 힘들었을 텐데 잘 이겨내줘서 고마워. 항상 있는 얼굴로 최선을 다하는 모습 보면 너무나 자랑스러워. 우리 혜원이도 앞으로도 모든 게 잘 되리라 믿어. 파이팅! 지원혜원, 아빠는 엄마와 잘 지내고 있으니까 지원이 혜원이도 서로 의지하면서 잘 챙겨주고 건강하게 잘 지내길 바래. 사랑해.
Sorry I can't be the father-daughter breakfast, so I'm sending this video. The question was, what are you most proud of your daughter for? I can't think of any one thing. I'm proud of you for everything you do, really. You're beautiful, smart, funny, you try your hardest at everything. The thing I am most proud of, I suppose, is that you are you. You're your own person and you're determined. A couple of years ago you said you wanted to go to boarding school, and there you are now, loving it and doing fantastic. And you've already decided what you're going to do after school, which is great, and I know that you'll get there if you want. That may change, but whatever you decide to do, I'm sure your determination will get you there. I'm so proud of you, love you, and miss you, and we'll see you soon.
Dear Tracy, what I am most proud of you is your strong self-management. You are kind, sweet, positive, and artistic. Hope your dreams come true. Tracy, 加油!
I am extremely proud of you both for your courage, your determination, and your work ethic, and I can't wait to see your movie. Here is my best picker just for you.
You make me so proud because of your hard work at school and your holiday job and things like passing your driver's license, but most of all for being such a beautiful, caring, sensitive daughter. You rock.
지호야, 안녕. 잘 지내고 있지? 우리 지호가 이제 그 미주리 간 지도 벌써 4주차에 되네. 처음에는 지호가 함께 아빠도 무용도 많았고 걱정도 많이 되었는데 우리 지호가 거기 가서 너무 잘 지내고 좋은 친구들도 너무 많이 사귀고 잘 적응한 것 같아서 아빠는 정말 기뻐한다. 아빠 정말 사랑해. 알지? 사랑해 우리 첫째 딸. 12월 달에 건강한 모습으로 보자. 사랑해. 잘 지내. 안녕.
Hi, my name is Steve Ashby and I'm Amelia's dad. Knowing Amelia, if she's watching now, she'll be carrying behind the chair somewhere with embarrassment. You put it on the screen. Surprise, Amelia! Well, there's many things, but most of all, I'm very proud of the way she's adapted to living and schooling away from home. This is something I've never did. I don't know how I would handle it at her age. I'm blown away by how well she's handled this in Southern New whatever the future holds, in terms of scholastic results or career opportunities, the important thing to me